Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of State Test Review. Today we're starting our prep for the 7th grade Ohio State Test, using all of the released state test questions that have been given as publicly available. We're going standard by standard. If you're watching this chronologically, this is the first standard I am covering. 7.EE.1. So let's hop right into it. All right. So question 1 from the spring 2017 OST. No calculator allowed for this question. Select the 3 expressions that are equivalent to -2 parentheses 4 minus 3x close parentheses plus parentheses 5x minus 2. So first off, the big important thing to notice is that it says there are 3 expressions, which means we are not leaving this question unless we check 3 answers. Okay? This is testing our knowledge of the distributive property. The distributive property, you'll know, happens when you have a number like this directly out in front of a parentheses like this. Usually there'll be no sign in front of it. It can also come into play if you have a multiplication sign next to it, but most of the time it'll just be written next to it just like that. So how you do this is you are distributing, hence why it's called the distribution property. You are distributing this 2 to everything, this -2, excuse me, to everything in this parenthesis. Okay? And when do you do the distribution property? Distribution property is always, distributive property is always multiplication. So, typically you could go about simplifying this and doing it all in one step. However, especially in questions like this, I show all my work because odds are each of my steps will be one of the answers. So let's distribute first. -2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8, and with 1 negative, it will be -8. -2 times -3x, you're combining the coefficient. Remember, the coefficient is the fancy word for the number in front of a variable being x. You're going to multiply the coefficient with this -2. -2 times -3 makes +6. A negative times a negative makes a positive. The x just comes down with it. Here, there is parentheses. There's nothing really to distribute. You could say you're distributing 1 if you really want to, but anything times 1 is just itself. We call that the identity property. So that's just going to come down without the parentheses. Now, we stop here and we check our answers. Are any of our answers this expression? No. Right here. That's one of them. All right. Now we go to the next step. Next step is combine like terms. Okay? So let's combine our variables first. 6x plus 5x. When you combine variables, all you're doing is you're adding their coefficients. 6x plus 5x. 6 plus 5 makes 11x. And then you have the -8 out front, plus 11x, minus 2. Stop. Check. No, wait. There it is. Last step. Combine -8 and -2. Whenever you're subtracting from a negative number, it's going to get more negative. My favorite example to use is if you are $5 in debt If you borrow $5 from someone, and then you borrow another $5, that makes you at negative $10. Okay, it doesn't magically make your debt 0. So 11x comes down. Negative 8 minus 2 makes negative 10. And we check. No. There we go. We have 3 things checked. Those are our 3 answers. Huzzah. Question 2. Create an expression equivalent to 2 parentheses 3x minus 1 minus 3x plus 4 using the least number of terms. This is very important wording here because this means that you have to have it in what we call simplest form, okay? So first step when you have these should always be your distribution. Let's get the distribution out of the way. Distribute this 2. Okay, remember distribution is always multiplication. So 2 times 3x makes 6x. 2 times negative 1 makes negative 2. And then everything else will just drop down. Now, this is an expression that is equivalent to our original equation. However, this is not the least number of terms. We need to get this to simplest form. We need to combine like terms. So what like terms do we have? Well, we have 6x and we have negative 3x. Combine those. 6x minus 3x gives us 3x because 6 minus 3 is 3. Then we have negative 2 plus 4. Negative 2 plus 4, if you're starting at negative 2, would become positive 2. And what I like to do is I combine like terms is as I do them, I like to cross them out so I know that I've used everything. And we are left with 3x plus 2 as our answer. All right, let's go to question 3. Question 3, this one allows a calculator from the Spring 2021 OST. Create an expression equivalent to 4, parentheses 2x minus 1, plus 3, parentheses 1 half x plus 5. That does not use parentheses. So let's talk about the difference between this question and the last question. The last question said using the least number of terms, meaning it had to be in as little terms as possible. Remember, a term is anything separated by an addition or subtraction sign. So here we have 2 terms, 3x and 2. Here, in question 3, it just says create an expression equivalent that does not use parentheses, meaning that you can just distribute and be done. So let's distribute. We're going to distribute this 4 to this first parentheses. 4 times 2x, 4 times 2 is 8x. 4 times negative 1 gives us negative 4. You can confirm this in the calculator if you would like to do so. Let's zoom that out a little bit. And we would do 4 times. Where do we get negative on here? Negative 1? Can you do that? Yep, negative 4. Okay. Then we distribute 3. And I apologize if you see me fumble with the calculator a little bit. I'm used to different calculators, but from my understanding, these are the ones you're going to use in the test, so these are the ones I want you to see on these videos. Okay. So let's do 3 times 1 half x. So, easiest way to do that, 3 times 1, and you hit this ABC button, 2, equals. And it gives you 1 and 1 half. I'm assuming this would be a similar function. There you go. You can hit Shift and hit the ABC button again, and that will convert it to an improper fraction of 3/2. You don't really want to have a, oops, I'm using the wrong color. You don't really want to have a mixed number as a coefficient for a variable. It's much preferred if you leave it as an improper fraction. 3 times 5 is 15. And at this point, you're done. 8x minus 4 plus 3 over 2x plus 15. That's your answer. Why? Because all it needs is to not have parentheses. Does this have parentheses? No, it doesn't. So you're done. All right. Question 4 from the Spring 2022 OST. No calculator allowed on this one. Select the two expressions that are equivalent to this whole thing. All right. So, this has a lot of fractions in it. Let's talk about how we're going to address this. First thing, we're going to distribute the 4. Okay. 4 times 1 over 8. This is a whole number times a fraction. The way you handle this is you put the whole number over 1, and then you just multiply across. 4 times 1 is 4. 1 times 8 is 8. Okay, so let's keep a running thing down here. 4 over 8 x. 4 times negative 1. 4 times 1 is 4. There's only one negative, so it stays negative. And then we distribute our second. So now we do 1/2 times, I'm sorry, it's negative 1/2 times 2/3. The negative is only accounted for in the numerator in this situation. So negative 1 times 2 makes negative 2. 2 times 3 makes 6. So you have negative 2/6. So we do minus 2 over 6x. Negative 1/2 times negative 6. We'll go a little bit off here. Times negative 6. Again, we put the negative 6 over 1. And multiply across. Negative 1 times negative 6. Two negatives make a positive. 1 times 6 is 6 over 2 times 1 is 2. 6 divided by 2, because remember, that's all fractions are. It's just a fancy way of saying division. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So plus 3. Does this match anything we have? No, but it's close. Okay? We see here that these have the minus 4. And this has the 3. One has minus 3. One has plus 3. Odds are one of these is correct. So you got to look to see if you can simplify your fractions. Okay? So 4 over 8. Can that be simplified? You think of the largest number that can divide into both. If it's not 1, then it can be simplified. Situations where both of the, excuse me, the numerator and the denominator end in 2, 4, 6, 8, or 0, with the exception of 0, can always be simplified by 2. But in this case, 8 is divisible by 4. So I'm going to divide both of these by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. 1/2 x minus 4. Same thing here. These are both even numbers. These can both be divided by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. X plus 3. Now we check, does this match one of our answers? What do you know? It does. It matches this one. All right. So now we get to the last part of the question. We're going to break down something that goes into here. Here's a little trick you can use. Okay? The trick here is that you'll notice that all 3 of these have the same coefficient. They all have 1/6 x. So even if you don't know how to combine 1/2 minus 1/3, which would be involve finding a least common denominator, which would be 6. Use the context clues of the question to try to find your least common denominator. Okay? Even if you know that you don't know how to do that, you know it's always going to come out to 1/6. Right? Because it's telling you to select 2. There's telling you there's 2 correct answers. Right? So realistically, all this is asking is, what is the constant going to be? Remember, a constant is any number that's not attached to a variable. -4 plus 3 is -1. So my constant is going to be -1, which means my correct choice would be that one. All right. So then we have question number 5. Once again, no calculator allowed. They like having you do these equations and expressions ones without a calculator. Which expression is equivalent to -3 times 2n minus 1/3 minus 5n? Well, let's distribute. So we do -3 times 2n. -3 times 2 would make -6, and the n just comes along for the ride. -3 times -1/3, well, let's just do that. -3 times -1/3. Again, just like we did last problem, you put the 3 over 1, multiply across. -3 times -1 makes +3. Over 1 times 3 makes 3. Anything over itself, 3 divided by 3, always makes 1. So this is -6n plus 1 minus 5n. All right, so where are we at? Where we're at is we can now eliminate choice B, because we know that we're going to end up with 1 as our constant. We can now eliminate choice B. We can now eliminate choice C, because we know we're going to end up with 1 as our constant. The question becomes, do we have 1 as our coefficient? Or do we have -11 as our coefficient? 6n minus 5n, -6n minus 5n, -6 minus 5, it gets more negative, so it's -11, which means your answer will be D. All right, let's keep on moving. Last question for video 1 here. From the Spring 2025 OST, that's just last year. No calculator. An expression is given. -3x plus 7 plus 11x minus 2. Enter values to create an equivalent expression. All this is asking you to do, combine like terms, which we've been doing for a few questions now. We should be a pro. Okay, combine like terms. So let's identify our like terms. We have things with a variable of x, -3 plus 11. -3 plus 11, or 11 minus 3 is 8. Cross them off as you use them. And then 7 minus 2. 7 minus 2 makes 5. And that's your answer. Simple as that. All right. So that is our first standard, 7.EE.1. I hope that all made sense. If you have any questions, please let me know.